to 11 servings of bread, cereal, or rice. 3 to 5 of vegetables and 4 of fruits is best. Their antioxidants and fiber help you to digest.
What we're going to cover in this video is the fire plight disease and the Hendra virus. If you want to jump to a section straight away, you can use these links here to either go straight to the fire plight disease section or the Hendra virus section. But before we start, I quickly want to go over why these kind of videos are done, because this video itself is not a syllabus dot point video, but actually just covers diseases which are related to the syllabus dot points. So the reason why this video is quite useful is because we talk about the role of quarantine, which comes from syllabus dot point. We talk a bit about use of pesticides to prevent disease. We also talk about the evidence of pathogens and insect pests, and the effectiveness of quarantine in Australia in preventing disease, and also the shift from the emphasis from treatment to prevention of disease, right? So these are parts of syllabus dot point, which will all be covered in this video. I also want to quickly talk about either homework questions or questions in general. So this actual fire plight and Hendra virus was a question that was asked, and I'm really more than happy to answer any questions. For example, with this one, I've never heard of the fire plight or the Hendra virus, so I myself had no idea. But that means I can also do some research and find out a bit more information myself. So that's interesting for me. But also it's quite useful just generally for anyone, because the more knowledge you have about things which relate to syllabus dot points, the better you can answer, especially your 5 to 8 mark questions, which will often require you to have extensive knowledge of different parts. So basically everyone benefits from questions. So if you have any questions, you can either give me an inbox message or leave a comment in any video below. And also, because I realize I haven't really talked much about myself, I quickly just want to say I'm not a teacher, I'm a student teacher. What that means is that I will become a teacher by the end of the year. I'm doing teaching as a degree at uni. And also I didn't actually do the HSC, I did the IB when I was a student. And because I don't have much experience, I'm not a teacher for 10-20 years and I haven't done the HSC, that means that I myself am not familiar with the HSC syllabus. I'm basically learning as you guys are learning, which means the likelihood of there being mistakes or errors, I'm only human, there will definitely be some mistakes in the videos that I make, and people already found some, and it's always good if you find, or if you think something might be wrong, or if you know something might be wrong, leave a comment in the comment section, and just let me know, because I take no offense at all, and I think it's important for me to realize that if I make a mistake, or for you to obviously not make that mistake again, or if to repeat that same mistake. So I'm not super trained, I haven't done 20 years of teaching, and I haven't done the HSC, which means mistakes and errors will be part of it, but I take the most effort to make sure that the videos are as few mistakes in it as possible. Like I bought all the books, and I've done all my research, but there will be some mistakes. So after this, I'll just head off to the fire plight and Hendra virus. So the fire plight disease, this is actually a disease which affects pear and apple trees. So pear and apple trees. And it's caused by a bacteria. The bacteria itself is called Erwinia amylovara. Sounds a bit Russian. But the Erwinia is the genus, and the amylovara is the species. And it's caused by bacteria. So it's the Erwinia amylovara is a bacteria. Now what this bacteria does, first of all, how can it enter the pear or apple trees? It's possible that there might be openings because of insect bites. So you can imagine if, for example, an insect bites on a leaf or bites on an apple, that there might be a bit of an opening, which means it's like a wound, right? So the insect bite is like a wound for the actual plant. And that means that anything can go inside and cause infection. So that's how the actual Erwinia amylovara bacteria might enter the actual plant. Now what happens? First of all, what often happens first is your blossoms swell. So these are your blossoms here. Here they're already dead, but what they do first is they become really big and swell, right? So they become really big. And after that, what happens is the leaves and the blossoms will wilt and die. Anyone's confused what wilt means? If, for example, this were how it usually is, straight, wilting means it just sort of drops off a bit, right? So you can see these leaves just start hanging a bit. That's called wilting. And they also become black and die. So the blackening means the part has died. Now that's important because remember from I think I talked about a video where I talked about bacterial infections and blight. what blight means is basically the death. So blight means death, and that's why fire blight disease is something that causes death. That's a sign of a bacterial infection. Blight is a sign of it, and these black spots means that parts of that parts of that plant have died. So after the leaves and blossoms start dying, what happens is either the affected area dies, or if the whole tree is affected, then the whole tree dies. So either parts of a tree are infected and that will die off, or the whole tree is affected and that means the whole tree will die. And so there's usually a progression. First the blossoms will sort of swell up, then you have the leaves and the blossoms start dying and wilting. Also the fruit can also be affected. And after that, the affected areas will die and problems sort of arise. Right? So the actual infection areas can be the shoot, which is this part here. It can affect the fruit, which is this part here, or the blossoms and the leaves, which are these parts here. Right? So more or less the fire blight disease is a really problematic disease. And the fire blight disease is actually found in these parts of the world. So we have them in North America, we have them in Europe, and you can't see it clearly, but this here is a country called New Zealand. And New Zealand itself is also infested with this fire blight disease. So many of the apples and pear crops are infected with fire blight disease. And that's one of the reasons why Australia is really careful when it comes to importing from New Zealand, right? So if at the moment Australia itself, so Australia is disease-free. It does not have much of this plight problem. But the Australian authorities fear that if we import things from New Zealand, then that disease might spread from New Zealand to Australia. And at the moment, there's actually, I'm pretty sure it's still in place, there's an import ban. So the Australian, you remember these here stand for the Australian Quarantine Inspection Services. That's responsible for all the quarantine that happens in Australia. At the moment, we have a quarantine ban. But this quarantine ban might actually be lifted. The IRA is sort of a proposal that comes from the AQIS. So the Australian Quarantine and Inspection Services have launched this IRA, which is a proposal. And what the Australian Quarantine and Inspection Service is saying is if New Zealand abides by rules and regulations, so this IRA is all about rules and regulations. So if if New Zealand makes sure that their food and their fruits, the pears and apples are grown in a certain way and controlled in a certain way, then we might let them in. So at the moment there's an import ban, but if this IRA passes, which is a proposal, then that means as long as New Zealand would follow certain rules and regulations, then their fruit would actually be allowed to enter Australia. Now, this is what the AQIS have proposed at the moment, but there's a lot of fear, especially from growers in Australia. So there's growers, like people that grow apples and pears in Australia, have a lot of fear of that proposal because they fear if it goes in, however safe we try to be, it's possible that it can spread. So this banner here was put up by Australian farmers. It says, "Fire blight burns more than fruit trees. It's a blight on society." So what they're saying is, don't let New Zealand fruit in. Reject this IRA proposal because it's just going to do us harm. The risk is not useful for us. Right? So Australian farmers are against it, and New Zealand farmers want to export into Australia so they can make more profits. So at the moment, there's a bit of a standoff between the two. Now, what happens if some of the actual plants have the disease? Well, how to manage? We can either use antibiotics. Remember, antibiotics can only be used against bacteria, and this is a bacterial infection, so we can use antibiotics to try to remove it. Or we can try to use pesticides. And why might we want to use pesticides? Well, remember I said that insects themselves kind of make an opening that the bacteria can go into. So by using pesticides, we can kill the insects, which means there might not be anything that opens up that wound. So these are two ways we can try to manage the fire blight disease. But overall, it's hard to manage. So we want to make sure we just have it not be there in the first place, right? So that's what we mean about prevention as opposed to treatment. We don't want to treat it, ideally, we just want to prevent it, which is why the AQIS at the moment has the ban, right? At the moment, the Australian Quarantine Inspection Services has a ban to make sure we can prevent disease from occurring in Australia. But that IRA proposal is being considered at the moment, and that could open up problems for Australia. So that's hopefully enough about the fire blight disease. And quickly also about the Hendra virus. The Hendra virus is known as a virus. So the other one was a bacteria. This is a virus. And it's known as, this is its species name and genus name, Henipavidios hendra. So this is the genus. And the other one was the species. Now the Hendra virus affects animals, whereas the other one affected plants. And we have 3 different types of species which are all affected. The fruit bat, the horse, and the human. These can all be affected by the Hendra virus, which is unique because most viruses only affect 1 different type of species, whereas this virus affects 3 different types of species. Now, why do we need to know about this? Because there's been an outbreak in Australia, a couple of outbreaks in Australia. The first one in 1994. And this outbreak was on the properties of a trainer, so a horse trainer. So you can see here there are on the actual stable of a horse trainer. Because a horse trainer, there's a name, I forgot the name. I think it was something like, I'm not going to try to remember the name now, but there was a name of one of the trainers. The trainer died of this virus infection. The trainer died. And also 13 of his horses died as well. So you have a trainer who has died, so the person trains horses, and quite a few of his horses that died as well. And that was the 1994 outbreak. Now, the Queensland Department of Protection, QDPI, which stands for Queensland Department of Primary Industries. I'm also going to attach these files here as well. Queensland Department of Primary Industries. What they did is, as soon as the outbreak occurred, they collected specimens. So they went to this stable, they collected specimens, which is just samples, so they could analyze them, right? So the QDPI collected the specimens, and what they did with the specimens is they brought it to the AAHL, which is the Australian Animal Health Laboratory. So these do research. And the AAHL, Australian Animal Health Laboratory, what they did is first they tried to find the cause, right? So we didn't really know what was going on. We found out that this was a new type of virus. So we found out through this specimen that this was a new virus. It's never been around before. So first of all, we found out it was new. We hadn't any known outbreaks. And also we found out that it was spread through horses. So that horses could get infected, that was obviously clear. But also that fruit bats are the actual host. So fruit bat are the host. A fruit bat is affected by it, like it has it inside of it, but it doesn't have any symptoms, it doesn't die from it, right? So it's just a host. It will carry it from one to the other, but it itself won't be affected. So the fruit bat, what it does, it urinates, because the actual virus is in the urine, which is quite interesting. So here we've got the Hendra virus, a picture of the Hendra virus. And what it says here is the fruit bat, so number 1. And it says, flying foxes or fruit bats, which carry the Hendra virus but are not affected by it, secrete contaminated urine, reproductive fluids, or birth matter. So the actual virus doesn't spread through the air, it doesn't spread through coughing or whatever else, it spreads through urine. Which is one reason why it's not that contagious, right? So you have to get in contact with urine somehow for the fruit bat to go give it to the horse. It's not spread through the actual air. So for example, if there is, let's say, a bit of water that the horse drinks out of, and the fruit bat urinates into it, pees into it, then they can spread from the fruit bat to horse. That's how it gets from fruit bat to horse. It's often through urine itself. That's what the AAHL found out. The Australian Animal Health Laboratory found out the cause was this fruit bat giving it to the horse for the urine. And so yeah, horse eat food contaminated with infected material. That's how it goes from fruit bat to horse. And how does it go from horse to human? Humans handle the horse and are exposed to nasal and respiratory secretions, saliva, and urine. Humans cannot pass the virus on to other humans, right? So because of, for example, nasal secretions, and horse has, I don't know why I'm drawing yellow stuff or green stuff on horses' noses, but that should be the secretion, right? So that's just normal part of what they do. And then the human might sort of touch it or whatever else, and then some will get it into their own mouth or wherever else, and that means that it can pass from the horse to the human. And it says if a human can't infect another human, right? So now we've established how it goes from fruit bat to horse, and how it can go from the horse to the human. Right? So that's how that the trainer died, and 13 of his horses died for this cross-contamination. Now, what kind of symptoms and what kind of mortality rate does it have? Remember, symptoms is the appearance, fever, spasm, etc., etc. And mortality rate is the likelihood of them dying if they have the actual infection. So for the horse, the kind of symptoms they have is there's lots of fever, lots of weakness as well. They just become fatigued, they have fever, and muscle spasms. These are 3 signs that they might have this type of infection. And 70%, so that's a huge number, 70% of horses that have this infection will die from it. Now humans, what their symptoms will they have is going to be cold, fever, and coughing. So these are quite sort of pneumonia kind of symptoms. And also they'll have a headache as well. But if you have the cold, fever, or coughing, and the headache, and don't worry, you're probably not going to have the Hendra virus. These are general symptoms, but I'm just saying that these are the symptoms that people have that have Hendra virus infections. And overall, I think it's like 57% of people who have this virus will die from it. So the mortality rate is 57% for humans and 70% for horses. That's really high, so it's a really deadly type of virus. Now, after the AAHL found the cause in 1994, that was the first outbreak in 1994, what happened next is they tried to find a better way of diagnosing it, right? So what diagnose means is the way we can make sure that someone has the disease. So they try to figure out a better way of diagnosing it. And also, they started working on vaccines and antiviral medication, right? Vaccines is the prevention part. Antiviral medication is the treatment part. So they started working on all these different things. And they were quite successful, right? So they had better ways of diagnosing it. They found a better way of having these antiviral medications which can help fight the infection. And they also developed better vaccines. Even though they have managed to improve their understanding of the virus, between 1994 and 2011, so these different types of dates, a total of 7 people have died from the virus, and a lot more horses. So 7 people and a lot of horses have died from the virus. So even though we have more knowledge, there still have been quite a few outbreaks, usually isolated. So that's the thing about the quarantine again. Once we find a case, we isolate it. So we quarantine the area, we decontaminate the area. You can see here, these are decontamination squads. So they make sure if there is an outbreak, everything we can do gets done to make sure that there are no further outbreaks. And again, the Australian Quarantine Inspection Services have been quite effective at doing that. So overall, even though 7 people have died, that's often unavoidable. These are, we try our best with the quarantine, but sometimes these infections just come, especially because it's a new virus and we don't know that much about them. But so you need to know about the 1994 outbreak. That was when the horse trainer died, and you might be able to find out his name because he does have a name. I just completely have a mental blank. I don't remember it. And you should know that his horses died. We decontaminated the area. It's all good. We found the cause, which was this new virus called the Henipaviarius Hendra virus, which has never been around before. And we found out that it infects fruit bats and then goes from fruit bats to horse to human. And in between 1994 and 2011, another 7 people have died in isolated incidents. There was no major outbreaks. There were only isolated incidences. But then in 2011, there was another major outbreak. So this is more of a major outbreak. You can see this map here. We've got Brisbane and New South Wales being affected. So there are on kind of 5-6 different locations where people or horses were affected. Quite a few people were sick. They didn't die from it because of also the new, obviously, antiviral medication. So people who were sick didn't get killed this time, but a couple of horses died. I think 4 horses died during the 2011 outbreak, which affected 5 or 6 different properties. Right. So remember, think about the 2011 and 1994 outbreaks, the major ones, and just know there were isolated instances between the years as well. And what you should also know is the Hendra virus. Actually, so Hendra is the town in Queensland where it originated. So the actual virus came from the Hendra. This property must have been in Hendra. It must have been a town in Queensland, which is why it's called the Hendra virus. And overall, most of the incidences have been either in Queensland or New South Wales. So that's most of the instances that we found. But overall, our quarantine is doing a good job, and our AAHL, our Australian Animal Health Laboratory, have actually managed to make a vaccine. So we believe we've tested a vaccine on horses, and we believe that we can actually vaccinate all horses in the future to eradicate this virus. So there should be no problem in the future. But yeah, hopefully that was useful.
Thank you for watching.